Hi there, and welcome to the Play Therapy Circle. Before we begin, please note this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not provide therapeutic advice, and listening does not create a client therapist relationship. All views expressed are my own, and any case examples shared have been de identified to protect privacy. If you're seeking personal support, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional in your area. Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Play Therapy Circle. I'm Kylie Ellison, a therapist, clinical supervisor, and play therapy trainer, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is a space for thoughtful, soulful conversations about child-centered therapy, play-based work, and what it means to show up with presence and compassion, both for our clients and for ourselves. Whether you're a seasoned play therapist, a student just starting out, or someone deeply passionate about working with children, you belong here. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Play Therapy Circle podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ellison, and I am so glad you are here. Guys, welcome to Wednesday. Welcome to the middle of the week and the slide to the weekend kind of vibes. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a good week vibes. I know I feel like a broken record saying this every week, but how is it the 11th of March? I'm recording this midweek. How are we almost into the middle of March? Truly. I hope you're all having a good week, or you've had a good week since the last time we connected. What are you guys up to? What are you doing? What am I doing? Not a lot. No, I'm just kidding. I'm doing quite a bit. And in fact, I'm overscheduled at the moment. I am traveling to Victoria in May. So I had the opportunity to connect with some of the team that I will be doing some training with in regional Victoria. So I'm looking forward to that. I am Queenslander, born and raised though, so I don't do the cold. And apparently it's going to be cold in May in Victoria. I tend to do my traveling when I go interstate at really the worst times for me in terms of weather. I generally am not very good with the cold. But anyway, there we are. I hope wherever this is finding you in the world that you are taking care of yourselves and each other. A lot happening, obviously. And I just want to acknowledge, obviously, that we have an international listener cohort. So we are in 49 countries, you guys, across the globe. So for any of you international listeners outside of Australia, and of course all of our Australian listeners, it's a busy time, and it's a hard time, and it's a challenging time. So I'm just sending all of my love and support to everyone who is listening out there. And it's so much about, what's within our circle of influence and what's outside. So I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and each other. I am planning this weekend to try and not do any work. Guys, growth, you guys. I'm going to not do work, and I'm going to relax. So let's see how that goes. I'll report back next week, you guys. Anyway, let's get into the topic for today. So I can't believe it's 35 episodes already. Truly, when I say that this is something that I cannot believe that I have actually been able to commit to, because when I tell you that I commit every 1st of January to going to the gym 4 days a week, and by the second week it has been completely abandoned. When I tell you that's the story, I'm not kidding. So it's amazing that we're still here together. And I truly do appreciate everyone listening. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking in there. Also too, I'm really distracted today on the video. For anyone who's watching on YouTube, I have a sore eye. So it doesn't look pretty. So I apologize for the red eye to anyone watching on the YouTube. Apologies. Okay, I really want to talk today about play therapy and the brain. I think that this is a very relevant topic. We were really grateful for all of the support in my most recent episode, not last one, but a few before, around why it's not just playing in the playroom. So I'm so glad that that resonated with so many people. So I feel like this particular episode, when we're talking about the brain and play therapy and the neuroscience, so what happens in the brain during a child-centered play therapy session, is going to be useful and helpful for a few people listening. So I think that we often get presented with this question around, can you explain why play therapy works? And you get that from so many stakeholders, whether that's, GPs or allied health or people in the community or school communities or a parent or a colleague or whoever. And I really want to give you some information that's not just jargon. This is really about us breaking down and understanding what happens in the brain during a child-centered play therapy session, and then how we can communicate that to others and promote child-centered play therapy as one of those modalities that really does have evidence-based but effectiveness in this space. So I think when we talk about why is it play that children use to talk, I'm going to go off tangent, promise I'll go back. I was only just, as I said, today connecting with the guys in Victoria, and we were talking about how to understand children through play, essentially. So they were kind of asking the question around how can we better understand what children are communicating and hear their views and wishes. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me tell you all of the things, because obviously in child-centered play therapy, we not only look at the play, we don't only just look at the behavior, but we have a deeper understanding of what's the unmet need behind it and what is that they're trying to communicate to us through play. So it's very important when we're talking about play instead of talking, and I don't know, I've probably said this in a previous episode, I'm sure by now, but when I am actually communicating with parents and caregivers around updates and progress, so ongoing parent consults, I'm using the word that they discussed and they talked, but they didn't use words to do that. I am honoring and referencing and acknowledging that children's natural mode of communication is play. So that's how they talk. They don't use words, they do it through play. So I'm certainly showing my respect for that when I'm giving those updates to say, your child's been discussing in therapy this particular issue, rather than me saying, well, they played out these different role plays related to, I'm not going to go into that at all. That's not part of my communication with parents. But I think that is certainly also acknowledging that children are not little adults, and we know in the history of child development theory that this was certainly something that people believed for a period of time, but we understand now that their brains are not yet wired for verbal reflection or that emotional language that the way we use as adults do. So we can't expect them to be able to put into words. And I feel like I might have talked about this once before. It might have been that playing episode that I was talking to you guys, where I was having kind of a reflection with my kids about it, because they're 13 and 14 now. And they were saying to me, because back in the day, before I had kind of the play therapy training that I have now, I was saying things to them like, use your words. I know you're mad now, but use your words. Tell me what you're thinking. What do you need? And they were like, it was so annoying, Mum. Truly, we just wanted you to stop. And I was like, oh my God, I get that now. They didn't have the language at 2 and 3 to tell me, you're annoying, cut it out. But they were showing me through their aggression and their frustration and their meltdowns and their tantrums, which my daughter had more than my son. So just to kind of go off tangent there as well. And she is very headstrong now. So the personality was strong from the get-go. But getting back to the point, it's really about the fact that children don't have that verbal vocabulary to be able to talk about how they're feeling, name their emotions in that way, like adults do. So why would we expect them to be able to do that at 2 and 3? We can't. The prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that's responsible for reasoning and language and emotional regulation, isn't developed until mid-20s. So this is again why children are going to use play as a preference to communicating over any kind of talk-based therapies or interventions. When we ask a child, how did that make you feel? Or can you tell me what happened? When you're asking children, we're asking them to access a part of their brain that's still under construction. They actually don't have that established, those pathways and that prefrontal cortex that I was just talking about. It's not there yet. So when we're asking them to tell us something, to recall information, to tell us how they're feeling, it doesn't exist yet, that those pathways and those connections don't exist. So for children who've experienced trauma or stress or dysregulation, the gap is even wider. So we talk about them being developmentally delayed. That moves them back in terms of that development even more. So the amygdala can be in overdrive, making those verbal expressions or verbal communication even harder. We know that from the stress response, that prefrontal cortex for adults goes offline when we are triggered and in fight or flight, and that amygdala and the bottom brainstem are activated instead. So they can't communicate. They can't do it through words. I feel like, I guess, in terms of practice, for most kind of settings, I feel like the research has gotten around enough that people know that when children, maybe not everyone, but most people understand that when kids are completely in fight or flight, there is no point trying to talk to them because they've completely flipped their lid, as Dan Siegel would say. So we know that, but even afterwards, if we're trying to get them to recall an experience where they have become completely dysregulated, it's not going to work. So play is the language of the child's nervous system. It doesn't require words. It accesses the whole body and the whole brain. So think about how a child processes a scary experience through play. They reenact it, they control it, and they transform it to try and find a resolution. This is not by chance or by accident this happens. This is neurologically purposeful. This is how they communicate. This is how they learn. This is how they grow, is through that action-orientated experience. That's really big. So when we're talking about play, is the language of the child's nervous system. That's super important for us to hold in mind, because then we look at play differently. It gives us insight into what they're trying to tell us and how they're feeling and the experiences that they've had. And they can do that developmentally by using their whole brain and their whole body. So they really need that play to be able to talk about the things that they need to talk about, or the struggles that they're having. So let's lean into then the next concept that we want to talk about around the window of tolerance, because this is the next component or concept that is applicable to child-centered play therapy. So we definitely want to talk again about Dan Siegel and his concept of the window of tolerance. And in particular, I guess, when giving kind of that definition, we're talking about the zone in which the nervous system can be regulated enough to process an experience. So if we've got kids that are above that window, they're hyper aroused. So it's that fight or flight, flooding, overwhelm, aggression. We see that a lot with kids. When they are outside of that window of tolerance of what they can cope with, they move into that hyper aroused and become aggressive. We also know that hypo arousal, when it's below the window, is so much more about that shutdown, that freeze, that disassociation, numbness or withdrawal. That's what we see in that hypo aroused position for a child. Inside the window, the child can feel, think, integrate, and connect. So that's where we're wanting to help children to stay, and that's where we want the healing to potentially happen as well. So children who've experienced trauma, especially experiencing anxiety, spend a lot of the time outside of their window, either too activated or too shut down. So if you have a child at the moment that really struggles to regulate, who may, in terms of those of you working in the play therapy space, one of the goals often is, when we're talking about that first level of goal setting around symptomology reduction, it often is to help bring that child into that optimal kind of window of tolerance where they're able to process their experiences. That might be the first goal, of just to kind of help them be able to get from that hyper-aroused state inside the window instead. So oftentimes in coping with that feeling of being triggered and dysregulated is that they sit outside of that window, either, as I said, aggressive, hyper-aroused, or hypo-aroused. So traditional talk-based approaches can accidentally push a dysregulated child further out of the window by asking them to reflect verbally when they're already flooded. So if we're not kind of looking at how are they doing and how are they coping, and we're actually asking them to do things that is outside of their capacity or their ability to do so, even though, you know, from a perspective we feel it's appropriate to be asking a child questions about an experience or what happened to them, we know from the neuroscience that they can't do it. And even more so if they're outside of that window of tolerance, they're completely flooded already. So it's going to be almost impossible to achieve that. So what is the difference in child-centered play therapy? What makes it so unique and incredible in this space when we're talking about the concept of the window of tolerance? The playroom specifically is designed to bring a child into their window of tolerance and keep them there. It's designed to bring them into the window and keep them there. What do I mean by that? How do we do it in child-centered play therapy? There's lots of ways we do it. So the consistent environment. We make sure that all of the toys are still sitting in the same spot, in the same way, in the same part of the room, the same type of resources every week. So there's that consistency of the environment and the resources that we use. There is unconditional positive regard. We have that sense of empathy and congruence and acceptance and regulation in ourselves to help support that regulation of the child. We provide predictable limits. We know in child-centered play therapy that we need to keep consistent across sessions the same limit. So if you put a limit in session 1, you need to keep doing that in session 2 and beyond. We don't get to chop and change and decide from one week to the next which limits we're going to set and which we're not. We know in child-centered play therapy that we are consistent with those limits. The therapist's own regulation and our presence in being regulated in the playroom is neurologically co-regulating for the child. It's a co-regulating experience for them neurobiologically. So this is why the therapeutic relationship is not just philosophical, it's biological. That's a couple of big words that I said together in one sentence, you guys. I'm so proud of myself. What am I saying? It's not just about that connection that we talk about from a therapeutic standpoint, but we're also talking about this biologically. Children are able to have that experience of co-regulation when we have a presence of regulation in the playroom ourselves, and there is so much that is learnt and consolidated and understood that has no need for any words. And I think that that's something that I know a lot of supervisees struggle with in the playroom as well, is this idea of it's important that I am, addressing certain topics, that I am unpacking certain parts or goals in a timely manner to make sure, because I know that, this is an investment from the parents. I know that this is an investment of time as well. They're bringing the child every week to therapy, and they can feel that pressure, right? And so then we can, by proxy, feel that pressure as well to be getting those outcomes, to be producing those goals. And I think that the hardest part sometimes is noticing that the relationship and the presence that you have in the room is so much more healing and reparative than we give it credit for. And I think that when we feel a sense of imposter syndrome ourselves, or feel like we need to be delivering tangible outcomes, it's about making sure that we're taking care of ourselves, getting clinical supervision, processing it, debriefing it, talking it through, because that is actually oftentimes more about us feeling like we're not necessarily achieving our goals than what's actually taking place in the playroom. So I really want to give you guys that invitation for compassion to yourselves, that you're all doing as play therapists right now listening in our communities. You're all doing an incredible job. You're doing incredibly important work. And truly, in our current kind of community and climate in the world, that having a space that is accepting, safe, trusting, empathetic is so beyond healing right now, you guys. And I just want you to truly acknowledge and give yourselves credit for that at the moment, because that is something that the world and the community needs right now. So I just think we underestimate that quality in ourselves as child-centered play therapists. And so I really want to acknowledge and celebrate that with each of you listening. So we connect to CCPT when we're talking about this window of tolerance. We connected to CCPT by saying that non-directiveness is not permissiveness. It's the deliberate creation of neurological safety. It's not permissiveness. We do talk, Carl Rogers does talk about in person-centered work, that quality of the permissiveness of that relationship in the playroom. But it's really about, and permissiveness in relationships in therapy, but what it's really about is the creation of neurological safety. That's what we're talking about. And that's what child-centered play therapy delivers to the clients that we connect with. So let's talk a little bit about the brain science of child-centered play therapy. Let's unpack it a little bit more. So when we're talking about the different parts of the brain, we're talking about the amygdala, which is kind of like, where there's lots of different analogies that are used, right, for the amygdala. We could call it, say, the brain smoke detector. That's kind of a cool analogy that I came across, where it's constantly, the amygdala in the limbic system of the brain, in the middle part of the brain, is constantly scanning for threats. In traumatized children that have experienced trauma or are highly anxious, it's hypersensitive. It is constantly working. It is constantly on alert, waiting for kind of that next threat to safety, even in safe situations. So the playroom and CCPT, and in that relationship that we have with the child, offers that gradual opportunity to teach the amygdala that this is a safe space. And I was saying that before, right? That one of the key benefits of child-centered play therapy is maybe, the 1 hour a week in that child's life where they truly do feel safe and trusted and seen and heard and validated and all of those good things. But when we're trying to create that in the playroom, it takes repetition, because we're talking about this neurologically, right? So we're trying to establish those pathways in the brain. It takes repetition and it takes time. And this is why CCPT is not a quick fix. It's not a 10 sessions and we're done. It does take time for us to do that. So if you're sitting in the trenches of that as a play therapist right now, truly, truly trust the process, not just from a philosophical and a framework point of view, but from a neurological point of view, that what you are doing matters, and it's actually establishing those pathways in the brain that's really important. The hippocampus is responsible for memory integration, so connecting the experience with the meaning. So trauma disrupts this process. Experiences remain fragmented and unintegrated. So play allows children to approach and reapproach difficult experiences at their pace. I truly think this is one of those core benefits of child-centered play therapy, truly, is not only the symbolism that's involved that children can use to get that emotional distancing, but it also is a gentle and child-led way of children unpacking and making sense of sometimes really traumatic experiences. So it gives children time at their pace to effectively be able to approach and reapproach those difficult experiences, and to be able to gain, I guess, at a neurological distance that feels manageable for them. It's actually something that's achievable for them. It's at their pace. It's not distressing for them. It's something that offers that healing slowly, neurologically as well. So when we're then talking about mirroring neurons, I think that this is a really important concept that I often talk to parents about. So I'm sure many of you also would do the same. But I think in that mirroring neurons experience, where we're talking about how the brain is wired to kind of meet those feelings, or meet what the child is expressing with the same emotional level, because we know mirroring neurons came from kind of caveman days. I'm going off on a tangent, but I promise this will make sense, where obviously back in caveman days, we had to kind of match aggression with aggression to essentially ensure our survival. So we talk about like those mirroring neurons in the therapeutic relationship in the playroom. When the therapist is warm, regulated, and present, the child's mirroring neuron system picks up on this. So again, you guys, that presence, I feel like I need to do a whole podcast episode just on the therapist presence in the playroom. I think that's probably going to be my next one. I sometimes will change my mind, but I feel like this might be a good one, because I just think our presence in the playroom is so undervalued by especially beginning play therapists who feel that, real commitment and dedication to making sure that we're absolutely getting the language right, and we're, getting all of those things right in terms of the intervention and the framework. And I feel like a lot of the time I'm saying to those that I connect with, please don't ever sort of undervalue your presence in the playroom, your connection, what you are doing in being regulated with that empathy, congruence, and unconditional positive regard. It's literally, when we look at the neuroscience, it's meeting those mirroring neurons with those mirroring neurons. Their mirroring neuron, I can't say that so many times at this time of the day. I'm so sorry. The mirroring neurons, that's where I'm going to stay, you guys. You're trying to do that both in that relationship between the child and the therapist, and vice versa. So this is the neurological basis for empathetic responding. in child-centered play therapy. It's not just about the child's feelings being heard. It's about one regulated nervous system helping another nervous system regulate. Let me say that again because I tripped on my words. It is about not just helping the child understand how they're feeling. It's about one regulated nervous system helping another nervous system to regulate. There's the neuroscience behind it, you guys. Oof. My last point in this topic is about the neuroplasticity of the brain, which is where we have so much hope for the children that we connect with each and every day in the playroom, because we know that the child in children's brains, they have the capacity for change. They do. Its neuroplasticity is so incredibly important to emphasize here in the capacity for children to be able to move towards that self-actualization principle that we talk about in CCPT and in person-centered therapy. So what does that mean? It means that the brain's capacity to change and form new neural pathways in the brain throughout childhood is extraordinarily possible. And what does that mean? CCPT certainly leverages this. So we have those repeated experiences of safety, attunement, connection, and mastery that help children to literally develop those new neural pathways. That is definitely kind of some of the language that I use when I'm talking to stakeholders. So I really do emphasize that that is a great way of explaining to others that this isn't just play, this isn't just having fun. There is neurochemistry here. There is neurobiology happening here where we are in essence, establishing those new neural pathways. And so we're helping children to have those experiences that will leave, some sort of, hopefully, new way of children being able to cope with the world. And I've been grappling with this at the moment, just with endings with kids and what that looks like. And I think that that's something really important to hold in mind as a play therapist, is that regardless of when and where and how a child ends with us in a therapeutic context, that we get that opportunity to leave our mark in hopefully a positive way in terms of that neurochemistry, that there is hopefully some new neural pathways in the brain that the child may lean into in the future. So we hold that hope for sure, but we definitely recognize and acknowledge that this is why the research shows that CCPT is working. It's not magic. Sometimes parents will ask us, where is your magic wand? Because that would be great. And I'm still looking for mine. So if anyone has found this, tell me. It's the neuroscience meeting the relationship. Oh, you guys. It's the neuroscience meeting the therapeutic alliance, the therapeutic relationship. That's what's happening in the playroom each and every time we connect with kids. I just feel like it's just such a privilege and an honor to be able to do this work. So I hope that, in kind of highlighting some of these things, it really comes about often when CCPT is, critiqued or questioned as to its effectiveness, whether it's going to benefit the child. It often comes across in parent consults, confusion around how it could possibly work, which is what I started this conversation saying, right? Can you tell me why play therapy works? Here's the neuroscience behind it. We've got the different parts of the brain. We've got the window of tolerance. There is so many parts of this that lives and breathes and happens in the playroom every time we walk in with a child and connect with them. So what we're talking about here is really a strong linkage here between neuroscience and CCPT. So let me break that down a little bit more. When we're talking about, not only is it just an approach, but how the theory is already doing the work. So we've got our unconditional positive regard helps to provide that level of safety for the amygdala for the child in the playroom. Unconditional positive regard creates safety for the amygdala. Non-directiveness provides that opportunity for autonomy that activates that reward system, helps build self-efficacy, helps them to be able to connect and build those new neural pathways, to be able to establish healthier coping mechanisms and healthier ways of engaging and connecting in the world through that non-directive space. Consistent limit setting offers predictability to the nervous system. There you go, you guys. That's something to absolutely share with others. It's not just therapeutic limit setting for the sake of it. We're actually helping to provide regulation for the nervous system. Empathetic responding helps to promote co-regulation through mirroring neurons. You guys are going to remember that word now because it's so hard for me to say at 10 to 5. in the evening or the afternoon. That's not something I recommend saying at the end of the day. But it's that empathetic responding that helps in that co-regulation and those neurons, mirroring neurons, meeting each other for that attunement and regulation and connection. Huge. So important. Child-led play themes help the brain to work through experiences at its own pace. So if we offer the opportunity for kids to be able to, with time and at their pace and in their way, process their experiences, we're going to have that effective integration and movement through those experiences. So what does that mean for when we explain CCPT? I mean, we've chatted through a lot of stuff, you guys, in just under 30 minutes. And I swear I was going to keep myself to a timer because you guys know the last couple of times that I've recorded these podcasts, I've been like, yes, I got to get going. I got to get home to my kids and, put on my mum hat for the afternoon. So let me summarize for those of you still here. Thank you for still being here. What does this mean when we're explaining CCPT? All jokes aside, play therapy isn't just letting your child play. Let's talk about it. It's a structured neurological healing, and it's an environment that delivers through the medium of play facilitated by a trained therapist. Ta-da! Let me say that again. Play therapy isn't just letting kids play. It's a structured neurological healing environment delivered through the medium of play facilitated by the therapist. Parents don't need the full neuroscience, but they deserve to know that this is evidence-based. So this is the real reason why it works. And this is what we're sharing with parents, caregivers, stakeholders, and whoever that needs to understand better that this isn't just play. And I feel like I've probably in 30 minutes made a fairly good argument for why we are actually saying that. So let me kind of summarize all of this together. So we want to talk about what have we covered in this episode. So children's brains are not built for verbal processing. They just can't. It's not where they're at. It's not where their brain structure is at. It's not something that they're capable of doing. And oftentimes I think that when that happens, when we are asking children, and I am going to sort of say this very broadly within the education space, and I absolutely love and adore all of our people in the circle who come from an education background. You are so welcome here. But I think that as a kind of a institution in terms of school, that there is often, I guess, this expectation that, if something has happened, an incident has happened in the school setting, to be able to have a conversation with a child afterwards to talk through what happened and what they'll do differently next time. And the neuroscience doesn't back that up. Essentially. So I mean that with the absolute most love and respect there. But I think that there is definitely lots of room for growth for us in our communities around understanding not just children, but understanding the neuroscience behind it too, which helps give us that credibility to say children's brains aren't built the way that adults are. They just aren't. And so they don't have that capacity for verbal processing. We want to acknowledge the window of tolerance and how important that is in the child-centered play therapy space, because it's about the environment and the relationship are not just extras, they are the treatment. The environment and the relationship is the treatment when we're talking about window of tolerance. And neuroplasticity, because we talked about the different parts of the brain and mirror neurons and neuroplasticity, it means this works genuinely, and absolutely child-centered play therapy helps to change children's brains. We're literally doing that in real time, and that we have the research behind us to support that. So that gives you hopefully some words to be able to share. This might be a podcast you might want to share with parents to help them to kind of access that information and to better understand what play therapy is doing from a brain science point of view. But I hope that this episode has been helpful and useful for you guys. It's so important, I think, as we continue to hold that responsibility to advocate and educate and help spread the word about play therapy, that we feel like we have some of those words in our toolkit to be able to do that. So hopefully this episode has offered that for you. So the next time somebody asks you, why does play therapy work? You have an answer that goes just beyond, well, children communicate through play. It's more than that. You can talk about the window of tolerance. You can talk about the amygdala regulation. You can talk about neuroplasticity. We can talk about why kids can't talk using just words, that they can't talk about their experiences or their feelings, that they are not wired and don't have the structure and the brain structure yet to be able to do that, and that we can talk about how the relationship isn't just about having a relationship for the sake of it. It's the mechanism for change. that relationship has so many elements to it, and that presence in the playroom as the therapist that has such a responsibility there, which is incredible, and such a gift and a privilege. So thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful for all of the support and all of the love. Thank you so much. As you guys know, I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast already. We have our conference coming up, the first ever inaugural Play Therapy Circle podcast. We are very, very excited to be bringing that to Brisbane in October with Dr. Jodie Mullen. So please jump on our website if you are interested in checking that out. I also have mentioned, I think before, but I want to share again, if you have found obviously this episode useful, or want to just deep dive even more, or connect with our Circle community, we have our Circle subscriptions. So we have a membership community that we've created for child-centered play therapists who want to go deeper. So we have masterclasses, we have community forums, we have group supervision, and starting from $5 a month. So I hope that if you're interested, we'll put a link in the description of this episode, and I will make sure to remind you guys each week that it is there for all of you who are seeking that ongoing Play Therapy Circle community and support. So I am so grateful to each of you. I would love to connect with more of you in the circle. So please feel free to reach out. Follow us on the socials. I say that every week, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And I will be back next week. We are going to be moving into kind of Easter, so there might be some breaks here and there with episodes depending on where we are at. I'm going to take a week off over Easter, which is going to be great. And then I'm on the road in May, you guys. Like when I tell you in May, I am like everywhere. I truly mean that. So the episodes on the podcast over may be a little bit unhinged, but I'm sure it will still be helpful and useful for you guys. Thank you so much for your support. I'm so grateful to each of you. Go well, look after yourselves and each other, and I will see you next week. Bye for now. Bye. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Play Therapy Circle. If anything resonated with you today, I'd love it if you could follow the podcast, share it with a colleague, or leave a short review. It really helps others find our circle. And if you have a topic or question you'd love me to explore, I'd love to hear from you. This space is for you, and I want it to feel like a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you belong here.